beginning of the story was from my own chemical dependency, which started, way young. Like something wasn't right, and what it really came down to with the Iboga basically showed was this: is that I wasn't in my body, and I was getting evidence of the fact that I wasn't in my body when I had the last relapse on opiates, because I would wake up and I wouldn't know what room I was in. So I was literally waking up and not being in my body, and I didn't know that until later. But that was the very first real experience, was knowing, number one, that I wasn't in my body, and then experiencing being safe to be in it again. And that was probably the most profound shift that happened really early at the beginning. So once I realized that I hadn't been in my body all these years, I started asking myself, well, who else is in there if I'm not in there? And that's where depression came from. That's where bipolar came from. That's where all these behavioral, instinctual acts were being expressed as a result of not being in my body and trying to use these allies to take responsibility for myself. So in a way, Iboga was basically, and this is what they use it for traditionally, was making me from a child to a man. In other words, what's the consensus of a alcoholic addict is they're childish, they're emotional. They're childish. They're what are the three things? They're childish. They're grandiose, childish, and immature, or something like that. So anyway, I had all those things, and Iboga was like the nudge into adulthood. And so I wasn't really consciously aware of these things happening, but at the same time I was. That was one of the big things that led me into wanting, like, all of a sudden realized, whoa, this is this incredible tool. Because all the years of working in 12-step, the area that I was most comfortable in was helping people detox. So we were always bringing people home and putting them on our couch, and the kids are running around. It was like literally inviting them into a sober home and just saying, this is what sober people live and act like. We're just like, this is what we do. And really enjoyed having people, going through the difficulty of the detox, and then getting those first days of sobriety, and then, getting plugged into a group and this kind of stuff. But it was ineffective because it didn't have enough support, and we didn't have the resources. And so, this was the old school way of how people sobered up, because now they have all these, rehabilitation and treatment centers and all these kind of things. So when we found this, from our own personal experience of getting strung out again after having 5 years of sobriety, getting strung out on opiates for the first time, really, and then this long history of methamphetamine, and then like going through this process with the Ibogaine in 2003, and within moments realizing, number one, oh my God, it's gone, which was like the feeling of being on the fence of sobriety, of never really knowing at what point am I going to fall off, and on which side of the fence am I going to fall off on. So all of a sudden it was like I was off the fence, I was in the field, and I realized, like, this is the tool. This is the tool that we've been missing all along. That if we learn this, that we can really like just broaden our capacity to be helpful with our fellow addicts, which has always been the theme, right? It's like this wasn't a motivated business capitalist kind of idea. It was really more about, this is the stuff that we actually feel good about doing. This is where I feel good about myself and what I'm doing. And it's this whole new thing that is being introduced literally for the first time ever in the Western world. And it was like, wow, this is something to be a part of. There's a real deep inner craving to have wanted to be part of a tribe. Like, it was something growing up that was like kind of there in our first grade school, and what is it, like pre-high school or whatever. Like, you've gone through like 8 years with this same group from kindergarten, And then when we went into high school, it all broke apart. It was like the little, so there was this feeling that the world is like this now. Like you don't have that little tribe community that you get to grow up with anymore. You stay in your little hometown group with your cousins, uncles, and all that kind of stuff. It was like, no, you're thrown into this world of just vastness of, and then you're alone. You're alone. So, uh, really, it was my ex-girlfriend who kept saying, why don't we come down here and do this? And I said, man, I've been trying to get out of the Bay Area since we met, and you're willing to actually want to do this. And she said, well, we need to bring the kids with us. We need the kids. I said, oh my God, that would be such a brilliant idea for the kids to do a semester in Mexico. We're turning 15 and 13, so they're, and Asha and I actually had to check our sanity and went into a therapist and said, hey, you think this is even a good idea? And she said, look, you guys have got a plan. It's not too far away. If something ever happens, they could be on a plane and home in 2.5 hours. Like, it wasn't like we're all the way down in Oaxaca or down in Cancun or something like that. So it was like it worked. And it was really good for all of us, too. But, so that's kind of how the idea of going to TJ and working with the Ibogaine Association, and I became the house manager relatively quickly. And within a couple months, I was basically helping train the new doctors. They didn't know anything about it. Nobody knew anything about this. There was this one website by Howard Lotsoff, who is the godfather of Ibogaine, who wrote the Ibogaine dossier and had like a standardized protocol, which was like had basically some structure to it, but it had a lot of room for possible mistakes. And that was kind of the theme, was how can we best do this in a non-medicalized institutional setting. So I was trained in that setting, so I have the medical training, the whole EMT, emergency response training, and all that kind of stuff had already been there. And then they put me through it while I was working there, so that you basically, learn how the body stays alive. And then we built from there how to modify the treatment to best support people coming in that have been chemically dependent, sometimes for decades, and started to expand the whole thing. Because when I came in, they were doing it in 3 to 5 days. And they were literally taking them from a motel room and putting them into a hospital and giving them Ibogaine, knowing that they had just fixed at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then at midnight they were going into withdrawals again. So it was like there needed to be more control over the environment. And so all of this stuff started to be revealed as a result of just being a sitter at the or house manager for the aftercare, but just getting to observe 75 treatments under those conditions of controlled conditions where I wasn't actually responsible for choosing the clients or choosing, all these things, and got to make a lot of observational realizations of, this could be done better, this could be done at home, this could be. So what we really wanted to do is really create a hospital, an in-home hospital, rather than taking people to a hospital and then bringing them home. Why don't we reverse the order and bring them home and the hospital will be there? And that was the very first model of the Awakening in the Dream House. We had 10 clients within the first 6 weeks, and from that point forward, we were literally breaking even from the very beginning, and built the site, moved into a stable environment in San Pancho where there was a hospital, and got our first house near the beach, and that's where we completed our first year. And the members of the Dream Group, that's why it's Awakening in the Dream, is the members of the Awakening in the Dream Group in Portland, Oregon. 4 of those members came down with me that first year. That first year was really interesting. The second year was basically more of a design of my own staff. They kind of went on to what they needed to do. which was awesome that they came down and helped, and we got ourselves kind of settled. And in the second year, we found the dream house and had to coordinate somebody. That first year, we started realizing that we had three total. We had 3 serious dehydration issues, and realized that people needed to come in and we needed to stabilize them. So people would come in on a whatever, heroin or methadone or whatever, and the first thing we needed to do is we needed to stabilize them and have them under observation, make sure that they receive supplementation, make sure that they receive doctor intake, physical evaluation, if we needed to do any further testing, because we always had people do their EKG and blood work prior to coming down. So if we needed to do it again, or if we wanted more reports, or if there was something we needed more information about, we started creating a 10-day model, and then it went to 2 weeks. And so that we had a whole week of basically preparation going through the main session, and then another week of what we called integration, because it wasn't quite aftercare. And the integration, you would do the follow-up boosters and basically start to get your sleep pattern back to normal. So within that 2-week period, you would basically be prepared, go through the detox process, complete the detox process, and be in recovery, get basically your feet under you, and would close the detox part, be in the recovery process, and be able to make a decision without cravings, without a Jones, and without the nagging thought patterns associated with addiction. And then you could decide, do I want to be off these drugs, or do I want to go back? So what we were really trying to do is just be able to present choice to people. That was what we knew we could do in a 2-week period, based on the numbers of people we worked with and that model of presentation or providing the medicine. And that was kind of like how it all started for the Dream House. After 3 years, that became the standardized protocol. People were staying as long. There's still people there. And it's been 12 years now, right? We grew in numbers. I mean, we really had recreated that tribe, the tribe community that that I'd been craving so bad. We basically just created ourselves. We started realizing Iboga was very specific about where and how and what elements were necessary to do this right. And so the list was warm saltwater, tropical region, papaya, pineapple, coconut water, nopal cactus, aloe vera. We needed a river, a fresh running river.
Not cold.
It's really hard to detox in a climate where you have, temperature irregularities. The cold hurts, and this was all really specifically targeted and designed, like I said, for chemical dependency. Probably 3/4 of it was for opiates. The other 25% was stimulants. I just happened to be one of the very few people that had used Ibogaine for opiates and stimulants, and had the experience of working with people with stimulants. So it became kind of my one specialty kind of thing was working with people for specifically methamphetamine and cocaine abuse. And most other clinics didn't really have any knowledge or understanding, or like what was actually happening, like what was it actually doing, why was it working. If everybody was so stuck on this idea that Ibogaine stopped the withdrawals, and you didn't have withdrawals and you weren't going to be suffering through that, which is true to a certain degree. Ibogaine's only compressing the process. It stops the withdrawals and everything like that, but Ibogaine is actually not the medicine that fixes the damage that the drugs do. It's the noribogaine, and the noribogaine takes 72 hours. So what we started seeing was people that were using alcohol and tobacco and stimulants were getting the same profound peace of mind, no cravings, no loss of energy, clarity of thinking, all these same benefits that people were getting from opiates, because opiates is such a physical addiction where the stimulants are so damaging to the way the mind operates and functions. And so, they're all different protocols and all different treatments. So it was so beneficial to be able to learn how to use this medicine to be able. So what it led to was sexual addictions, other obsessive compulsive behaviors, people that were on computers or people that were in shopping sprees, even chocolate. I mean, it was like all of a sudden we started realizing what's really happening is it's breaking the neural network of memory associated with compulsive, repetitive thought processes that are no longer even consciously being created. In other words, they're just happening unconsciously. You're going down the road, you're on your way to go pick up your girlfriend or your kids or something, and next thing you know, you're sitting in a bar and you're drunk and you're doing lines in a bathroom. So it was like, how does this happen? And then how are you supposed to repair that? Like, this isn't like talk therapy stuff. There has to be a physical change in the biochemistry, because the brain is just going, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? I want to feel better. Okay, so what do you want me to do? Well, I'm going to use this to feel better. And the brain goes, okay, we know how to work with this. We'll take this, we'll create these proteins, we'll create these lipids, and you create a pathway of memory in the brain. And once that thing's in there, it gets paved, and then they open it up to 2 lanes. The next thing you've got is a 5-lane freeway going in there, and that you have no control, and that's addiction. And basically, that's a compulsive, repetitive, obsessive thoughts that are reoccurring and don't respond to reason, and that's the description of addiction. So somehow the Ibogaine was ripping apart that whole, and it literally does rip apart brain cells. It's taking apart that whole compulsive, obsessive, and I guess it has something to do with how like from the very beginning of this was, if you're not in your body, there's other entities and spirits that are going to take up residency. And so these elements have to be available, because people take opiates for medical reasons and they don't become stone cold junkies. So it was like seeing all of this as an observer, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm watching all of this, one as somebody who had gone through it, but I'm seeing hundreds of people do this, and as an observer, trying to understand what are the actions that are taking place. What is it that's actually going on when somebody ingests this medicine under these conditions? And that's what our job is to create the conditions in the container and support them and prepare them and integrate them. But as an observer, this was so fascinating, because we were watching new science. We were watching something happen that wasn't believed could happen before. In other words, you were taking people who had mental health issues, for years on, prescription medications, people who had been on methadone or opiates for decades, people who had lost all their teeth from methamphetamine and never believed that they could ever be normal. And we were reversing the story. We were bending nature. And that was really something to be excited about and to be part of. It was like we were witnessing miracles. And it was really intense, because, of course, the characters that you're dealing with have a whole lifetime of distrust and any number of other situations. A lot of sex workers that had been abused, people that had to do a lot of self-sacrifice in order to maintain and take care of themselves. Now, I really believed a lot of the addiction was self-medicating, and they just didn't know any other way to take care of themselves. And what was happening was it wasn't working anymore. And so these are some of the requirements that we started to now be able to make determinations. Now there's clinics that are following the standards and the safety protocols, and have some good motives behind them, but there's safe places for people to go detox now. So now we're wanting to be able to see, okay, we've done all this observation, we've done all this work, we've learned up to this point. Now how can we best utilize the nature of this plant to assist people already on the road to recovery? In other words, I don't want to try to convince anybody that life is worth living. That was something that was a big role that we did for a long time, but it's like that part of our journey's over. And so to be able to work with people who are already on the road to recovery, which may or may not include actual doing the detox with them, but more and more wanting to steer people towards that direction, but to do the inner workings of what the core motivation around self-medicating and why somebody would have abandoned themselves younger and had adopted this way of life. So we're basically saving people's lives, but not in the sense of saving their life, but the time in their life. In other words, instead of 25 years of addiction to wait till it stops working, we can do 10 years and they can come to the same conclusion. So they're saving 10 years of their life of trying to find their way out of this thing. And what we're seeing is a lot of young people, like I said, Marika became a nurse. I have a long list of people who went into a professional life, got an education, got married, basically had a life that they never thought and dreamed that would actually happen for them, that they were